It's time to break down the fight heard around the world.
After FS1's Emmanuel Acho delved into the Montgomery Riverfront Brawl, one user checked him.
Time to break down the fight heard around.
Not you. Not you.
Not Wilden on TikTok saw what we saw from Acho.
Welcome to the first of hopefully many episodes of Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man,
where he let NFL commish Roger Goodell coast through a convo labeled uncomfortable to his platforming of the Petaluma Police Department.
This man, Emmanuel Acho, who all of 2020 had a series called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, and he essentially invites white people mostly onto the show. I mean, he is therapizing white people out of all of the difficult emotions that they rightfully should have been having in 2020 and onward, right? I mean, like, there's an episode where he invites a panel of white cops onto the show. I mean, the main takeaway after he's listening to them talk about how hard it is that people don't trust them as a result of their own actions, his takeaway is like, yeah, you know, I think people underestimate that even though you're in uniform, you're still human, which, just considering what was happening at the time, regardless of how you feel about it, is a crazy tone-deaf thing to be saying on your platform.
True, and it's why Van Lathan also checked him.
But what I could say is a black man, a prominent one, acting as an emotional butler for white people and serving them the most milquetoast, unspicy, unseasoned brand of racial discourse and accountability possible could definitely be harmful.
More from Wilden.
A couple of years later, he's on a podcast talking about, you know, I am the appropriate person to be speaking as a mouthpiece for the black community like this because unlike black Americans, I don't have the generational trauma that would trigger me into an emotional response when I have these conversations with white people because I'm Nigerian, which doesn't even make sense when you think about the colonial history of everything, including Nigeria.
Here's that quote.
I grew up Nigerian American. What that means is I have the privilege of knowing where my parents came from. I go back to my village in Nigeria, but I went to a private school, majority white, in Dallas. But then I went to church in the hood. So I grew up with black people. I grew up with Nigerian people. I grew up with white people. All the while, I have the privilege and luxury of not having generational trauma because my parents were born in Nigeria. So man, my method is removing some of the sting because I don't have that sting and trying to deliver a message in a manner that people can receive it. Primarily white people.
Okay. Let me tell you why what you just said offends me.
And Van would check him some more.
But it's just so clear that this man has built a platform that is like really dependent on white people's comfort around him. And he's happy to play that role and actually doesn't have that much self-awareness around it. He wants to profit off of his proximity to this Montgomery event and his blackness while still maintaining that white comfortability, even though we all saw that video. We know what that video was about. We know why we feel good about that video. But he does this whole commentary video without naming the racial aspect of it one time.
We've opened this can of Acho before, haven't we, on this very medium? From his nonsensical takedown of Sha'Carri Richardson over and over and over again, needlessly, may I add, to dissing Florence, Griffith, Joyner, and a long breakdown on Twitter in video format, to his embarrassing take on the ganj.
You said that we couldn't have Olympic athletes smoking marijuana because somebody was going to get high and throw a javelin and stab somebody in the heart.
What you just said was hyperbole.
What did you say? You said that the javelin was going to do what? What was the javelin going to do?
I projected the question of, it's okay if somebody's running wall high in a straight line, but what happens if they're throwing the javelin?
And you know what you said to me when we were on the phone? You said that you've never smoked weed before.
Correct.
So you don't know what the you're talking about.
To former co-host Marcellus Wiley's rant on the man.
Oh, Acho. Let me get to Acho. Acho and I had this like pulling in different directions. With Acho, he wants to be a star. Me, I just want to do the work. When you want to be a star, you want to pop off. And then immediately I started to hear stuff and know stuff that was like, oh man, we ain't gonna be partners like I want to be. He wanted his own show and didn't want to tell me he was working to try and get his own show. I heard it through grapevine. I heard it from bosses. I heard it from contemporaries. But then I started to realize there were times on the show where when you're not pulling in the same direction, you leave your other partner out to dry, right? Like you ain't there for them because there's a rooting interest that is selfish.
As the saying goes, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.